Hello there, everybody, and welcome to our September LoveBiz workshop. And we have the rather awesome Dr. Lucinda Holmer here today to share our workshop details. But also, Lucinda, welcome. Please do introduce yourself and also share your background and what we're going to get from today's workshop. So over to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you for that lovely welcome, Sue. And it's nice to see some familiar faces, and hello to the people I've not met before. So as Sue said, my name's Lucinda, and I have the business that I'm in love with is my coaching business. But I haven't always been a coach, and I've had quite an interesting journey with how I got to being a coach. So I used to be a consultant anaesthetist in the NHS, and I did that until about 2016. And I'd had a period of burnout a bit before then, which had made me realise that I needed to pay attention to what was going on in my brain and my body a little bit more, rather than just pushing myself to exhaustion all the time, which is what I did. And I had that wake-up call, and I just thought, I'm not very happy, I don't think, in this job, and I'd really like to be doing something else. And I had learnt to fly when I was about 40, and I realised when I was 40 that pilots needed medicals. And so I'd done the training to be able to do medicals for pilots. So when I wanted to leave the NHS, I thought, well, maybe I could set up a business doing that. And I got brave, and it took a lot of bravery, but I did it. And I set that business up. And then I realised that the bit that I missed most of all about my job in the NHS was all of the coaching and mentoring that I did when I looked after the trainees, because I used to be a college tutor and I looked after all their education. So it just came to me that maybe I'd like to be a coach. So I did the training, ILM training to become an executive coach. And here I am. So that's my little brief journey to how I got to being a coach. So today's workshop came out of some inspiration that I was doing on my own business while I was trying to think of ways to do some marketing. And I read this brilliant book by, I've got the title at the end, called The Business of Stories by Susan Payton. And while I was going through all the exercises in the book, I just thought, well, so many of these things really apply to coaching and the way that we live our lives. So that's where the workshop idea came from. And so this is the very first time I've run it. So I hope it's going to run to time. We will see. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to share my screen and then we will get going. So let's have another go. It did work a minute ago when I tried it with Sue. So there we go. We'll share that one. And then I just need to go into present mode. So can everybody see? Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so I've got an extra screen open to my right with my notes on it. So if you keep seeing my eyes darting to the right, that's why I'm doing it. I'm looking down there. So harnessing the power of your story. So the aims for today, I'm going to help you a little bit to write something about your own story. I'm also going to help you to find some villains that could be lurking in your stories. And then the last thing that I'm hoping to cover is to help you think a little bit about how you can use your story and how you can connect with your ideal client that you would really like to work with. So, why do stories matter? Well, we all love stories, and from the beginning of time, humans have loved stories, and we used them before we could read and write to convey information. And then if you think about other places that stories crop up, they help us to communicate our values and our beliefs. So religion, for example, and parables and all of those things that help us to work out how we want to live our lives with the morals and things like that. They also entertain us. So we love reading books, we like going to the cinema, we love watching TV. And often in stories, we can see ourselves reflected in them. And they often inspire us and they can give us hope as well. And then right at the very bottom, they also make us buy stuff. It's how clever marketeers get us to buy their things. So why does your story matter? Sorry, I'm clicking away down here. There we go. So often we're very good at overlooking one of the most important stories of all, and that's our own story, the story of you. So why do you think that that might happen? Well, I think it's because we're brought up to do what society tells us to do. So we're supposed to be nice and quiet. We're not supposed to boast. And we tend to minimize our achievements, especially as women, we do that. And we start thinking things like, well, I'm a bit ordinary really, and I haven't got anything interesting in my story. I haven't done anything notable. I haven't really had any major achievements. And then we're prone to use that awful statement of, I'm just a doctor, or I'm just a lawyer, I'm just a business owner, I'm just a teacher. And it just minimizes where we stand and what we do with our businesses. So in my view, no one is just an anything, because all of the things that we do in our lives, they require skills, and all of those skills can be transferable. So you have to be an amazing organizer, you have to be able to communicate, you have to be able to negotiate. And those are all skills that are really worth shouting about in our day-to-day lives. So they're really important things. So you're unique, and others will find your story fascinating. So we might all go to Hello magazine and read snippets about the Hollywood stars, and we're fascinated to know what's going on in their lives. But actually, they live quite odd lives that we really can't relate to. But other people will be able to relate to you in your normal life. So if you overlook your story, there are some real nuggets of gold that you're missing out on, and they can help you move forwards when you're feeling stuck or overwhelmed. But they also have power, these stories, to limit you, and they have the power to hold you back from doing things that you want to do. And then the last thing is that they really can help you to connect with your ideal clients. So people buy from people. They don't buy from websites, and they don't buy from brochures. They buy from other people. And there's a little quote down at the bottom there, which I quite like, which is from Seth Godin, which is, people like us do things like this. So let's move forward. So yes, I'm going to start off by telling you a story. So we're going back to the 1970s, and it's a swimming gala in Coventry. And I had been chosen by my swimming club, which wasn't a particularly prestigious swimming club, to be in the under-9 girls relay race. And I was dressed from top to toe, a bit like that girl in the picture. That's not actually me. I was wearing my swimming hat, my Speedo hat. I had my Speedo goggles on, and I was wearing my Speedo racerback swimming costume. So I was ready to go. But I was the last one to swim for my team. And I'd spent the whole of the race being worried about getting the team disqualified, because if we got our changeover wrong, if anybody dived in too soon, that was it. The team would be disqualified, and we couldn't possibly win the race or get any points. Now, we'd all been practicing this at swimming club quite a bit, but it was a bit variable. And to be honest with you, it wasn't often that all 4 of us got it right. But then we were only 9, so we were learning. But very quickly, that became the least of my worries, because I was watching us getting further and further behind in the race. In fact, as I stood there waiting for my turn, I watched all of the other girls either side of me dive in, and they started, and I was still waiting for the girl in my team to get to the end. And I realised, as all the other girls finished the race at the other end, I couldn't possibly win. So I had 2 choices. I could either give up and walk away, and then we would be disqualified because we hadn't finished the race. And then also, we wouldn't have scored the 1 point that was available that would count towards the whole team's score. So I decided to focus on getting that changeover right. And I waited for her to get there. She touched the wall, and in I went. And I swam as fast as I possibly could, because I really wanted it to be over quickly, because everybody was watching me. I could hear a lot of noise as I was swimming along, but I ignored it because I just wanted to get to the end and be finished. So I finished my length, and everybody clapped and cheered. And I was actually a little bit embarrassed, because I realised they were all looking at me. And when I got out of the pool, the coach said to me that we'd all done really, really well. The team had done well. All of the changeovers had been perfect. Nobody had got us disqualified, and we'd scored a point for the team. But the best news of all was that I'd scored a personal best time, because I'd swum so fast to get it over and done with, that was the best I'd ever swum. So our club overall came last that day, because, as I said, we weren't very good. And I was a bit disappointed. And I met my mum and dad and my sister outside in the foyer after we'd finished. And I was always allowed to treat out of the vending machine. And my snack of choice was usually salt and vinegar chipsticks. They were the ones I liked to have. And then we got into the car to drive home. Now, this bit, I've practiced saying it many times, but I often choke up a bit because I no longer have my dad. But as dads do, he always liked to give a summary of whatever sporting event I'd taken part in. And he was really enthusiastic about this one, and I really couldn't understand why. So I was a little bit disappointed still, and I had a pep talk from my dad. And he started off by saying, "Did you not hear all the cheering and the clapping for you?" "Well, yes, Dad." I said, "But we still lost. We didn't win the race." And then he said, a few salient points, which to a 9-year-old I'd never really thought of at all. He said, your team practiced those changeovers and you all did really well. You really worked together. You were really good team players. None of you got the teams disqualified, and you got a point overall, which counted to the score. Your team didn't win the race, but that really doesn't matter because you got your best ever score. So you did really well personally. So that was a really good thing to take away from it. And then he pointed out that it takes real guts to dive in on your own and swim a length of the pool with everybody watching you when the race is finished and you can't possibly win. And then he told me I should be really proud of myself. I nearly made it without doing it. There we go. I'll have a swallow and I'll be fine. So it had never occurred to 9-year-old me that I could be proud of anything. So I sat in the car and felt quite good about it actually afterwards. So having been disappointed with it all, I thought, yeah, that was really good. And it made those salt and vinegar chipsticks taste so much better on the way home. So how can, oh, I haven't moved my, there we go. How can we start looking for gold in our own stories? So I'm going to hand it over to you now. So I've just told you a story about me and some of the points that I learned in that story from my dad's summary. So I was going to turn it over to you and just ask you to spend a few minutes, we'll say a maximum of 5 minutes, to think about something in your own stories which helped to define you. They were a defining moment where you had to try really hard and something good came of it. So I put some prompts, which you should be able to see on the right-hand side of the screen. And they're there to get your creative juices going. So if there's anything else that you can think of that's better than those, that's absolutely fine. I just want you to think about that. Now, I'm not going to ask anybody to share what they write because this is personal. And I just want you to think about your own stories. So don't worry, nobody's going to be put on the spot. So some of the prompts are, think about maybe when you overcame a challenge, maybe a time when you had to take the lead in something, a time where you had to step up or walk away from something, time when you might have had to fight for something that you believe in, a time when you had to stick up for someone else, change something, when you might have surprised yourself. You can think about achievements, setbacks or pivots, and maybe people who helped you or people that held you back. Think about the lessons that you learned and think about some of the choices and the decisions that you made. So I can only see Sue on my screen and the little screenshot that I've got. So I'll give you, say, 5 minutes, and then I'll start talking again. So if you want to turn your cameras off, then that's absolutely fine. Do whatever feels comfortable for you. And I'm just going to have a sip of water and get ready with the next slide when we're moving on. Okay.
Right, just 10 seconds left now, ladies. Kate's all ready.
That's great. Well, I'll move
Karen's all ready.
I'll move the slide on. So what was the point of that exercise? So the point of that exercise is so that moving forwards, something like that can help you to access a really positive state of mind for yourself. So memories are a really powerful resource, and you can use them to trigger a positive shift in your emotional state. So if you've got a problem that you've come across and you're thinking, I can't do that, or I don't know how to work it out, if you use your memory to remind yourself of a time that you were really at your best in a similar situation, it can really help you to get into the right mindset to take that first step to move you forward. And it's a really good idea when you're thinking about that memory is to experience it in its full technicolor glory. And by that, what I mean is, how did it feel like? What were you actually feeling at the time? What did it look like? What could you see? What could you hear? And also it's useful to tap into other senses as well sometimes, like, so a smell or a taste. Is there something that really makes that memory vivid for you? And then when you're in that tricky circumstance that you've come across, if you can imagine yourself accessing that positive state of mind, it can really help you to move forwards. So I can really remember when my dad said I should be proud when I'm sitting in the back of the car, how that felt to me. And so if I've achieved something and I'm minimizing it, I can say to myself, no, you should be proud of that. And then I can access that memory and remember how it felt when I was sitting in the back of the car feeling really proud. And I can really taste those salt and vinegar chipsticks as well. So let's move on. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about are some of the villains that might crop up in our stories. So all good stories have villains, don't they? So The Wizard of Oz would be a bit boring if we didn't have the Wicked Witch in there. And Darth Vader really makes Star Wars. And the fact that he ends up being Luke Skywalker's dad is really quite, chilling to the bone when you get to that part of the story. So some of the stories, villains in your story, will have been there day after day, and also year after year. And they're often villains because they are the stories that you tell yourself about yourself. And they create limiting beliefs. So I put a couple of definitions up there. So a belief is something, and the important bit is that you think is true. So it's what you think about it that's the important part. And a limiting belief is a belief that has the power to hold you back from doing something that you might want to do. So an easy example of what a belief is believing in Father Christmas. So when I was a really little girl, I completely bought into Father Christmas and I really believed it. Then I got a little bit older and I might have questioned it, but I didn't dare let on I didn't believe, because he didn't come if he leave you any presents if you didn't believe in him. And then as I got a bit older still, I didn't want to spoil it for my sister, even though I knew it probably wasn't true. And then I got to the point where we all knew that it was a magical story. And I stopped believing in the power of that story until I had children of my own, and it all became very magical again. So it's really important to know that beliefs can change over time, and you can change your beliefs, and you can also change those limiting beliefs. And that's a really powerful tool to have. So I'm going to tell you another story now to illustrate what I mean. So when I was growing up, we never really did very much painting at home. My mum allowed us to do colouring in. We did plenty of that. But anything that was messy had to happen at school. All of the craft that involved any paint was done at school. Now, I learnt why that was when I became a parent myself. And these two pictures illustrate why. So this one on the left-hand side of the screen is my 3-year-old at the front and his friend at the back. And they had been very quiet while we'd been at my friend's house for about 20 minutes. And we panicked a little bit, thinking they'd been too quiet for a bit too long. And we came upstairs, and the little boy at the back knew where all of the emulsion paint was put because he'd watched his parents decorating his sister's bedroom. And so they decided that they'd do some decorating of their own. And they made a really good job of painting a lot of things in his bedroom. And they also then went into the bathroom and decorated the bath panel as well. And that's the state they were in when we found them. And then the one on my right is my other little boy. So he was about 2 in that picture, and you can see I'm prepped for this. He's got a really good overall on, trying to keep him clean. He's strapped into a high chair, so there's no way he can get down and run around the kitchen with that paintbrush. But there's far more paint on him than there is on any other surface. So I'd learnt my lesson from not being allowed to do it myself. So I got to school and I was good at drawing. I was all right at drawing, and I liked designing things, but I wasn't very much good at using poster paint because I'd never practiced. And then it came to being about 13 or 14, and we had to do our options for O-levels. And we didn't get very much choice. So you could drop maybe one thing and pick one thing up. But overall, you had to make a little bit of a choice. Now, I'd already decided that I was going to do history and German as my options, and I wasn't going to do art. But our art teacher made us all go up one by one to the lesson when we were about 14, and we had to sit down to have a discussion about whether we were doing art O-level. Well, my bum had barely touched the seat when I sat down, and she gave me this really loaded direct question, which said, "You're not going to do art O-level, are you?" Well, there was only one answer for that, and it was, well, no, I'm going to do German and history, thank you. Well, that's really good, because you're not creative enough to get a good grade in art. And I thought, fair enough. What I heard was, I'm not creative. And I believed that for a very, very long time. I heard that narrative, and I started to take it on board, and I looked for any evidence that there might be that it was true. And I was going to be a doctor. That's what I wanted to do. I needed to be analytical. I needed to problem solve. I wasn't doing any of this creative stuff, and I didn't need to be creative. It was fine. The teacher said I can't do it, so I'm not creative. And then it further got backed up when I was a bit older and I was at university at medical school then, and I had a boyfriend who was doing business studies. And we had this conversation where, and he came out with it that he didn't think I'd be very good as a business owner because entrepreneurs really needed to be creative. And I just thought, oh, well, fair enough. Yes, I know I'm not creative. So no, I couldn't ever imagine running a business, but that's okay because I'm going to be a doctor, so I don't need to worry about it. And then I ignored all the evidence to the contrary. And that's really, really common. People do that when they start believing things. So things like this, I didn't think that those were creative things. So they were making and doing things. So knitting was following a set of instructions, and that wasn't a creative task at all. And then on the right-hand side, my son wanted, when he was 3, he wanted a Nemo birthday cake. And you couldn't buy one in the shop. So I solved the problem by making it myself, but I didn't view it as being creative in any way at all. And I really believed this for about 35 years, I think. And the pivot came when I was burnt out, and I've described that before. And one of the things that happened to me was that I went for CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And that allowed me to start unpicking and understanding a lot of the negative stories that I'd been telling myself. And it started to allow me to challenge my beliefs. Apologies for the barking dogs. Somebody's just rung the doorbell. So it helped me to start thinking outside the box. And what happened next was this creative explosion. So there's loads of things. I just tried everything. I couldn't get enough of it. So there's lino cut printing, top left, and then I went to a day to learn how to do screen printing. I got into garden design and I designed my garden. I started doing some sewing. I was doing, I think that one in the middle is Zentangle. The one next to that was I went to a mixed media evening class. That was the result of that. I had another go at drawing, and there's even paint on that one. And then I started journaling, and then I had a go at photography. So I have an embarrassment of craft supplies, but it was really, really helpful for my brain. So I learned that being creative, I could equate to getting into a flow state, and I started solving problems in different ways, and I became quite creative with my problem solving. So my limiting belief had stopped me tapping into that creativity. And when I was able to do it, it helped me in so many ways in my personal life, but also in the business that I wanted to set up. So I don't believe that old art teacher anymore. I don't believe that limiting belief. I don't believe myself because I told myself I wasn't creative. And there's a really good reason that that boyfriend became an ex-boyfriend. Oh, and I got better at cake decorating as well. So that's a couple of cakes that I'd done. So the next bit is all about some of the common villains that we have in our stories. They all lurk in the shadows, and as I said, they can be there for a very long time. So I'm a recovering people-pleasing perfectionist. Those are a couple of the ones that hold me back. And some of the traits that I've got, they really helped me to get to being where I am today. And striving to be the best that I could be helped me to become a really good doctor. But the people-pleasing part, that made me believe that I should always put other people's needs before my own. And I eventually forgot who I was and what I wanted from life. And the perfectionism also held me back from trying things because I wanted to be perfect at it, and I wanted to be really good at it really, really quickly. So the safest thing for me to do not to fail was not to try things. So I learned that in order to move forwards, that I needed to put my own oxygen mask on first. And I need to learn how to set some boundaries and how to accept that being good enough was okay. So I was going to ask you to do something else again now. I was going to ask you to take a few minutes to think about your own stories again. And then I want you to think about some of the common villains that come up for you. So I've listed again some on the right. I've already talked about perfectionism. Comparison, that's a really big one that comes up. We all compare ourselves to others. Imposter syndrome, where you think that you shouldn't be somewhere. People pleasing, the one that comes up with you just say, I can't because, and you give a reason why you can't do it. I'm not qualified. What will people think is a big one. And then feeling guilty about something or feeling shame about something. So Sue, can you set another timer? I don't know how we're doing. I think we've got plenty of time, haven't we? So if you set another timer, and if everybody just thinks for 5 minutes about some of their villains that they know will be lurking in the shadows, and then when you've identified what you think they are, I'm going to send you through a few questions just so you can think about them a little bit more.
There we go.
Brilliant. Okay, so hopefully you'll have come up with one or maybe more than one villain that tells you stories and that you believe the stories of. So I want you to think about now, just pick one of them because it's take too long to do all of them. What does that one villain make you believe about yourself? Just write 1 or 2 words down is all you need to do. And then I want you to give it a really long, hard think. Is what that villain says about you true? Have you got any evidence that you could present in a court of law that would prove what that villain says about you is true? And if the answer is no, which I suspect it might be, can you think of a better story that you could tell yourself? So when you wrote down the bit about what do you believe your villain is telling you, can you reword that so that it tells you something a little bit more positive about yourself? So you are writing that next chapter of your story in a better way for yourself. So if you can do that and you start practicing that skill, you can use your story to become a calmer and stronger and happier person. And it's a really, really useful thing to do. It takes a lot of practice, but it's worth trying and it's worth practicing at getting good at it. So let's move on a slide. So the next part, I promised you right at the beginning how to show you to start thinking about using your stories in your business. Now, I'm going to preface it by saying I am not a marketing expert. I think Sue is. I'm definitely not a marketing expert. And I don't have a multi-million-pound coaching business, but I'm learning all the time. I love learning. I'm a voracious reader and I love to solve problems, both logically and also now I solve them creatively as well. And this is what I've learned so far. So your stories, they create connection. And I'm hoping that those connections are within your networks, they are where you work, and they're also help to create connections with the people that you want to do business with. And when you connect with people, that creates trust between everybody that's involved. And people buy things from people who they trust. Your stories allow your ideal client to feel seen and feel heard. So if they relate to what you're saying, they will feel really that you get them and that they want to do business with you. Your stories can also be really inspirational. So they might not immediately lead to some business, but you might just create a little seed in somebody's head that they might come back to 6 months or 12 months down the line. And they think, I remember where I heard that and I want to investigate that more. Now I'm ready to take the next step. The other place that you can use your stories is with success stories. And those really can help show that you're an expert in your field and they help people to trust you as well. But most importantly of all, I think, is how your stories show that you are an authentic human being and people can relate to you. Now, the one thing that that is really important to take from this, and it's one of the reasons why I asked you at the beginning and said and reassured you didn't need to share everything, is that when you're telling stories in your business, you don't have to share every little detail about your life. You can pick and edit the bits that you think would be helpful for people to hear, and also you can choose the bits that you want to keep private. So you don't have to feel like you have to share everything to connect with people. And your stories can show how your client can have the thing that they want. And it's not by telling them, but it's by being the guide. It's by showing them the way so that they can be the hero of their own story, a bit like I've tried to encourage you in this session to be the heroes of your own stories too. Sometimes, as I've said, it's hard to know how much to share. So I thought I'd share for me what I do when I'm thinking of writing content. So a good rule of thumb that I've found is that, first of all, make sure it's true. Is it a true story? Is it mine to share? So I'm very careful that I don't share things about other people that they might not like. And then, is it kind? Is it a kind story? Does it have a kind and a nice outcome to it? It's not going to put anybody else down by me writing the story. And then, would I mind anyone, and I mean anyone, knowing it about me? Because once you've left it loose into social media land, it's gone and you don't have very much control over it anymore. And then the last one really is a gut feeling, is do I feel comfortable sharing that story? And if you're not sure, then you probably shouldn't be sharing it. And then if we loop back to my swimming story right at the very beginning, I wasn't wearing a swimming hat to keep my hair dry, and I wasn't wearing some goggles to keep chlorine out of my eyes. And I wasn't wearing a racerback swimsuit that dried really quickly after rinsing it out. I was buying into wanting to swim faster, because I wanted to get to the Olympics and I wanted to get a gold medal like my swimming hero, David Wilkie, because he'd won a gold medal in the Olympics in breaststroke, I think. So I pestered my mum because I wanted her to buy Speedo kit, because that's what all the older kids had and it's what all my swimming heroes had. And it was the story that I wanted to buy into and believe in. So that was what was really important for me. So right at the beginning, I said that I was going to give you the book title, and I remember to put it up on the last slide. So The Business of Stories is the book that I started to read by Susan Payton. And the other one that was the very first marketing book I read was This is Marketing by Seth Godin. And I find those both really useful. And then the very last bit was when we're going to open it up. We'll do that in a second. And then it was just, if people aren't following me on LinkedIn and all the other places, if you want to, that QR code takes you to my link tree and it's got all of the links to where you can follow me. So that's there. So I'm going to stop talking, and I've come in with enough time for us to open it up and to have a discussion about it.
Thank you so much, Lucinda. I would like to now just say thank you to everybody who's been watching on our replay, and we will say goodbye to you and then open up to the rest of the room. Thank you very much.
That's great.